God bless you.
Oh, that is wonderful. Thank you very much. That's a very kind way to welcome me. God bless you too. It's great to be here with the Chanel Catholic Primary School, and great to be taking some questions. We won't make them all about State of Origin this Sunday, but I'm sure there'll be other ones that people would like to talk about. And I understand, is Mrs. Cowardine there?
Yes.
Hello, how are you? I hear you're about to go off on a bit of long service leave.
I am taking some leave. I'm going to miss this school incredibly, and this afternoon's my last afternoon, so it's a delight to finish by welcoming you to our community.
Well, that's great. Well, you have a great leave. I'm sure it's been well earned over a long career of service to the school and to education. So thanks for everything you're doing. But look, it's great to be with you. I'm happy to have a chat about whatever you'd like to talk about. There's a lot going on with everything from the pandemic to all the challenges that brings, but many other things as well. So happy to throw it over to you guys to take us through.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister. These are my wonderful friends from Year 6 at St. Peter Chanel here at the Gap. They've worked very hard to craft some excellent questions for you. So I'm going to hand over first to Amelia. Where's Amelia? Come on up. Come and sit in the front here and take us away.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
G'day, Amelia.
In your recent G7 meeting, did you plan to make any decisions that will affect Australia?
Yes, we did. We were there talking about three major issues. One was how we were managing the pandemic and vaccines, and how we make sure that in the future, if there are any pandemics, how we might be better prepared. And that obviously impacts heavily on Australia. One of the things that we agreed that I was arguing for with all of the other leaders was that if there is any country anywhere in the world where they think a pandemic might be starting, there might be a highly infectious virus, that they would have an obligation to put their hand up and basically tell the rest of the world this was going on, so other countries could prepare themselves and take steps to ensure that virus didn't transmit across out of one country into the next. If that had happened with this pandemic back when it started in China, and then it went to to Italy and so many other countries and Iran, that was pretty tough. So we talked about that. We talked about challenges that Australia were facing in our part of the world and how we had to cooperate more to keep Australia safe. And the third area we talked about was how we were taking action on climate change. And I was making the point that we had to invest a lot in the technologies we need to ensure that not only can we address climate change, which is so important, and move towards net zero, but also to ensure that happened in all the developing countries as well. So places like Indonesia and Vietnam and China and others, because if the emissions, they don't care which country they come from. If the emissions are happening, it doesn't really matter which country is generating them, but we've got to make sure that they reduce all around the world. So the best way to do that is technologies that help them achieve that.
Amelia, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Amelia. Good question.
Lilia, you want to come on up?
Good afternoon, President. I am aware the leaders are asked to fix things. If you are pressured to fix things, how do you handle it?
How do I handle the pressure to fix things? Well, the thing you learn the most when you're in leadership is you've got to lead with others. What I mean by that is you've got to listen to a lot of other people and listen carefully to their perspectives. You might think you might have a lot of answers, and in many cases you do, but it's really important that you harness all the strengths of the people you're working with. And so particularly as we've been managing this pandemic, I've had my medical experts, my economic experts, my other ministers, the state premiers and chief ministers, working with them. And so it's important you harness all the skills and experience and the contributions of all of your team, and you work closely with them. So I spend an enormous amount of time doing that, working with the others in my cabinet and the other people who are there to help advise on the situations that we're facing. But the first thing you got to do when you're dealing with any problem is you got to listen first and understand what you're addressing very, very carefully.
Awesome. Well done, Lilia. That's fantastic. Next up, Prime Minister, we've got one of our environmental champions here from St. Peter Chanel. So, Thomas, you want to jump up?
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
G'day.
What is your government doing to lower pollution levels in Australia?
You means particularly emissions, carbon emissions?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about a number of things. Well, on carbon emissions, we've cut carbon emissions in Australia by 20% since 2005. Now, that's more than has occurred in New Zealand, in Canada, in the United States, and many other countries. And the way we've been doing that is particularly a thing called the Emissions Reduction Fund. And what we do is we work with various industries on technologies and programs which helps them change how they do things and to do them more efficiently so they have less emissions. And that's been a very successful program. We work with farmers to see how they can put carbon back into the soil. We've set up a $20 billion fund over the next 10 years that is investing in lower emissions technologies. And those technologies help you to keep making things like steel and aluminium and fertilizers and various other things, but to do it with very low emissions. And right now in our big minerals mining industries, resources industries, we're working with those big mining companies so they can reduce their emissions to zero, potentially in the next 10 to 15 years in a lot of those companies. Hydrogen is going to be a critical fuel for the future. And we're establishing hubs for where hydrogen can be produced between industries, scientists, researchers, investors, and other producers. And those hydrogen hubs means that we can power so much of our economy with that energy source in the future rather than now. The other things we're doing is on waste management. We're investing a lot of money in new recycling plants. We've just put $100 million into how we're managing our ocean environments better, mangroves and coastal areas, and taking the plastics out of the ocean, most importantly, through better waste management. So there's quite a lot going on in that area, and we're really pleased to be making a lot of progress.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Well done, Thomas. Marcella, jump on up.
Prime Minister, what
Hello,
has
Marcella.
been the most challenging part of your role during COVID-19?
It's a good question. There have been many, many challenges, but I think the important thing here is to have kept up everybody's confidence. Regardless of what the challenge is, you always get through it if you can keep people focused on the job in front of you and to not get discouraged. If people can still keep believing that we'll get through it, then they keep working on the solution and not becoming overwhelmed by the problem. And I think that's one of the key things you've got to do in leadership is you've got to make sure your team and the rest of the country, if you're a prime minister, can maintain that level of confidence. And one of the things we're really pleased about is that through this terrible pandemic, when so many other countries, they've still lost so many jobs and their health system is terrible in terms of the outcomes they've had. You know, in Australia, we've saved over 30,000 lives with the way we've handled COVID. And we've got almost 1 million people back into work in the last 12 months. In so many other countries, there are so many people that are still out of work. In the UK, even though they've got a very high vaccination rate, people are still dying every day from COVID. We don't have one person in an intensive care unit in Australia who has COVID at the moment, not one. And so that's been fantastic. But the challenge is to make sure that you're encouraging people, that they don't get discouraged and that they can all keep working together on the solutions rather than becoming overwhelmed by the problems.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Marcella.
Prime Minister.
Uncle Brendan says hello too, by the way.
I've got some good tips there. I reckon we've got some future leaders here at St. Peter Chanel. Ava, yeah, come on up.
Hi, Prime Minister.
Hi, Ava.
What do you intend to do about climate change policies?
Well, thanks for that. Well, it's the same question I got from Thomas, I think, before. And what we're doing is focusing on the technologies that we need to solve for climate change. So we can produce the things we need to produce, but use technology to ensure that we do that with low emissions or even what they call sub-zero emissions. That's when you take the emissions and you capture them and you store them. And the biggest technology changes we have to achieve is called storage of energy. And there are things like batteries, but there are also things like called pumped hydro. And that's where you have a dam and you let the water run down the dam, and that generates energy, doesn't generate any emissions. Then you pump the water back up to the top of the dam and you do it again. And you use things like solar power and wind power to charge the pumps that get the water back up the top. So you're using renewable energy. And hydrogen I've already spoken about. But technology is the way we're going to fix climate change. And because it's a bit like if you think about COVID-19. When COVID-19 hit the world, what did we all do? We tried to find the vaccine. We invested in the science and the research to find a vaccine that would immunise us from the virus. Climate change is a bit like that. Climate change is having a very real impact on our world and particularly the biodiversity. And so the way to fix it is to find the technologies like a vaccine that can help remove those emissions. And it's totally possible. And we're just going to have to invest more and more to achieve it. And we'll only solve climate change in Australia when we can also solve it in countries like Indonesia and China and Vietnam and in Africa and all of these other countries. And they need those technologies because there's no good just fixing it in Australia, because if the emissions are coming from all these other countries, well, our reefs, our waterways, our environments will be just as impacted. So we've got to solve the problem all around the world.
Awesome. All right, good question now, Prime Minister. I know your time's limited, but I've got two more good questions here if you've got the time.
Sure, no worries.
All right, Lexi, come on up.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Hey, Lexi.
If you had a chance to speak with your younger self, what do you think he would say to you?
If what I would say to him?
Yeah.
I'd say, make sure you marry Jenny.
Good advice.
That was a really good call. And so I'm very glad I did that. I'd do that every time. Again, if I had my time over again. I'd probably tell myself to get a bit fitter when I was younger and to keep on with some of my sport, because over time, it takes you, as you get older, it's harder to keep those things in shape. But no, look, I think I was really blessed as a kid. I had great family. I had great mentors. I was involved in great churches where I got a lot of really good instruction, and that really helped me to be able to set things up for life. And having good people around you and listening to them, and good counsellors, good advisors, listening to the experience of older ones, I think is really, really important. So I suppose when I was younger, I had the benefit of that, and I was careful to listen to it.
And good teachers too, I bet. Well done, Lexi.
I had great teachers. I had a great maths teacher, and he was our year master, and he loved the horses. And so he used to teach us constantly about probability theory based on the bets he was putting on the horses every weekend. And so it kept it pretty lively for us. He was a tremendous teacher.
Excellent. Well done, Lexi.
Thank you.
And finally, Cameron, bring us home.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
G'day.
What's your favourite part of being Prime Minister and why?
This is my favourite part. The best thing about being Prime Minister, and I'm sure is Julian there?
Yeah, just him.
Hey, and Julian will tell you the same thing. The best thing about our jobs is we get to meet lots and lots of people, and we get to hear their stories, and we get to understand what matters to them, and we get to know so much about Australia. And as Prime Minister, I get to do that all over the country, whether it's talking to you guys there today, or whether it's out in Indigenous communities or small mining camps, or big cities, doesn't matter where it is, older people, younger people, people who live with disabilities, people who work in the health system, people who work in our defence forces and are serving us overseas. I get to meet so many people in this job, and it's a great thrill to do that. You know, just last week, I think it was last week, I met the Queen again, and she's lovely. And I got to pat the corgis too, so that was pretty fun.
All right, well done. Thank you very much, PM. And I was talking to the kids before about the fact that you are in quarantine. So what are you doing when you're stuck in quarantine? Are you playing board games or getting pizza ordered in? Or
Well, I've been pretty busy, Julian, as you know, this week, because Parliament's been sitting, and I've joined the Parliament on the big Zoom camera, and there's been a lot of meetings, and I can still convene cabinet meetings. This morning, in fact, I had a meeting with all the Indigenous organisations that run health and various services around the country, over 50 of them, and we're working together to see how we can improve the lives of Indigenous people all around the country. So I've had a lot of work to do, and we've kept doing that work, and this afternoon's another good example of how it's a good opportunity to connect with people. But when I do get a bit of time out, I've been watching Ninja Warrior. Anyone else been watching Ninja Warrior?
there's a few hands up. Yep.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool show. I quite like that show. I don't think I could do it. I reckon you wouldn't be too bad at it, mate, but I reckon you'd give it a bit of a crack. But
there's some better sports people here than me, I think. Now they've got
I think my Ninja Warrior days are well behind me, but it's fun to watch.
Now
And I'll be watching Origin on Sunday night.
Well,
Go the Blues.
You're going to see us win, Prime Minister. Now, before we let you go, they've got a special goodbye. So, Nico, come up here and give us a vote of thanks, mate.
On behalf of everyone here, I would like to thank you for your precious time spent here explaining how aspects of Parliament and your job work. Everyone here enjoyed it and is thankful you came.
That's very fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, PM. We'll let you go. We know you're busy, mate.
Thanks a lot, Julian. And again to Mrs. Cowdown, you have a great break, and thanks for all the great work you've done for the school and for education.
Thanks,
Thank you
Margo.
very much.